Jalen Bennett stood alone in the center of the glass lobby, holding a worn, stuffed rabbit against his chest with both arms. The lobby of Sterling Corporation stretched 40 feet above him, all steel and polished stone, and the kind of silence that felt designed to make people feel small. Morning light pressed through the floor-to-ceiling windows in long, flat sheets, catching the dust that drifted between columns. Jalen did not look small. He looked like someone who had been told to wait and had decided that waiting was something he could do better than anyone else in the room. He was 6 years old. His hair was freshly braided in neat cornrows that morning, the kind of careful work that takes a parent 20 patient minutes before sunrise, and his small navy jacket had been pressed the night before by hands that had pressed a great many small jackets over the past 4 years. The receptionist at the front desk had noticed him 12 minutes ago and had not yet figured out what to do about him. She was a woman in her mid-30s named Rachel, precise and pleasant, who had been trained to handle difficult clients and unexpected visitors, but who had not been trained for this. She watched him from behind her monitor. He had not moved except to shift the rabbit from one arm to the other. He was looking at the large display board mounted to the left of the elevator bank, a rolling panel that listed the day's scheduled meetings, floor assignments, and internal announcements. He stared at it with an expression of calm, focused attention that she found unsettling in a way she could not name. She stood and walked toward him. "Excuse me, honey. Are you lost?" Jalen turned to look at her. His eyes were dark and steady. "No, I'm waiting for my dad." "Your dad works here. He's coming to see someone here." Rachel looked around the lobby as if the answer might be written somewhere. "Okay. And what's your dad's name?" "Darius Bennett." She did not recognize the name. She typed it into her system when she returned to the desk and found nothing. No appointment, no visitor registration, no badge request. She called the security desk. A guard named Patrick, broad-shouldered and expressionless, walked over and crouched down to Jalen's level. "Hey, buddy, you can't wait here without a registered adult. Building policy." Jalen looked at him. "My dad is on his way." "I understand that, but I'm going to need you to—" "He'll be here in less than 10 minutes, Jalen said. He said it the way a person states a fact about the weather. Patrick straightened up and looked at Rachel. Neither of them spoke. There is something worth pausing on here in the quiet of this lobby. We have a tendency, all of us, to read children the way we read weather forecasts, quickly, dismissively, with one eye already on the next thing. We assume that a small body contains a small understanding. But every parent who has ever been corrected by their own child knows that this is not how it works. Children miss the things adults consider important and notice the things adults have trained themselves to overlook. In a building designed to filter the world by status and credentials, a 6-year-old was about to become the most observant person on the ground floor, and no one would understand that until much later. On the display board above the elevator bank, one of the floor assignments was cycling through an error. The same conference room listed twice on different floors. A small glitch that had apparently been running since the board was updated the previous afternoon. No one on the morning staff had noticed it. Jalen had been looking at it for the past 7 minutes. He tilted his head slightly and read the line again, confirming what he thought he saw. Then he looked back at his rabbit and adjusted its ear. Evelyn Whitman from Human Resources arrived 4 minutes later, called down by Patrick. She was efficient and not unkind, and she had a policy binder's worth of protocol in her head for nearly every situation. She introduced herself, knelt to Jalen's eye level, and asked him gently but firmly to come with her to the HR waiting room on the 2nd floor. Jalen considered her. "Is my dad allowed to find me there?" "Of course we'll let him know where you are." "Okay," Jalen said. But before he stood, he pointed at the display board. "That conference room listing is wrong," he said. "It says the foster group meeting is on 12 and 14 at the same time. It's probably just a sync error in the display feed. Someone should fix it." Evelyn looked at the board. She looked back at the boy. She said nothing. Jalen picked up his rabbit and stood. Victoria Sterling stepped out of the elevator at precisely 8:47. The way she stepped out of every elevator moving before the doors were fully open, already reading the first message on her phone, her heels clicking a rhythm that the rest of the floor instinctively adjusted to. She was 26 years old and had been running Sterling Corporation for 14 months, inheriting the position from her father, who had stepped down due to illness. She was not beloved. She was depending on whom you asked either exactly what the company needed or exactly what it feared. She had restructured 3 departments in her first quarter, eliminated 2 redundant executive positions, and increased quarterly revenue by 11%. She had done all of this without apology and without a great deal of warmth. She noticed the boy the moment she stepped off the elevator. Evelyn was walking him toward the stairwell, but they had not yet reached it. Victoria stopped. Her eyes moved from the boy to Evelyn to Patrick and back.
"What is this?"
she asked. "A minor waiting in the lobby without a registered adult," Evelyn said carefully. "We're relocating him to the HR suite to wait for his guardian." Victoria looked at Jalen. He looked back at her without flinching. "Who are you waiting for?" Victoria asked. "My dad," Jalen said. "Does your dad have an appointment?" "He's coming to give someone important information." Victoria's expression shifted in the direction of impatience. She had a board call in 13 minutes, a contract review at 10 o'clock, and a lunch meeting she already resented. A child in the lobby was not a complexity she had space for. "This is not a place for children," she said. It was not cruel. It was simply a statement of organizational reality as she understood it. Jalen looked at her for a long moment. The lobby was very quiet. 2 junior analysts who had been pretending to review documents near the window had stopped pretending. "You'll regret this," Jalen said. The words were so quiet and so flat that for a half second no one was certain they had heard correctly. Then Dominic Pierce laughed. Dominic was the deputy director of corporate operations, Victoria's second in command, a man of 40 with a talent for reading rooms and a longer talent for bending them. He had appeared from somewhere near the executive hallway and was now standing at the edge of the lobby with his coffee. "Did the kid just—" He laughed again. "I'm sorry. Did he threaten you?" 2 other employees near the elevator suppressed smiles. Someone in the back of the lobby exhaled a quiet sound of amusement. Victoria did not laugh, but she did not look alarmed either. She looked at Jalen the way she might look at an unexpected line item in a budget report, mildly puzzling, ultimately irrelevant. She handed her phone to Evelyn and said, "Make sure he's comfortable in the waiting room." And she turned and walked toward the executive corridor. Jalen watched her go. He did not raise his voice. He did not cry. He simply turned to Evelyn and said, "Okay, can we go now? Here is something worth carrying with you out of this opening scene. The way we treat people who appear to have nothing to offer us is the truest measure we will ever leave behind. Not how we behave in front of those we are trying to impress, not the version of ourselves we present in carefully scheduled meetings, but the half-second decisions we make about strangers who in our private accounting do not yet matter. A child teaches us this without trying. A parent who has done their work right teaches us this on purpose. And if we are lucky, life gives us the chance to learn the lesson before we have caused too much damage practicing the other version. Dominic Pierce had been in his position for 6 years, which was long enough to have learned every elevator, hallway, and blind spot in the building. He moved through Sterling Corporation the way water moves through stone, patiently, persistently finding the path of least resistance. He was not a bad man in any dramatic sense. He was ambitious in a smaller, more careful way, the kind of ambition that does not announce itself but rearranges things quietly over time. He caught up with Victoria in the corridor outside the boardroom and walked beside her at her pace, which was the one skill he had perfected above all others. "There's a visitor situation," he said. "Unregistered. Guy's been trying to get a meeting for 2 weeks. No appointment, no referral. Keeps going through the general inquiry line. Security flagged it this morning." Victoria did not slow down. "Who is he?" "Some independent consultant. No company affiliation that we can verify. The inquiry didn't come with credentials." He paused just long enough to let the implication land. "The way these things usually go, it's either someone pitching a service we don't need, or someone looking for leverage they don't have." "Handle it," Victoria said. Already in progress, Dominic said. I flagged the front desk. If he shows, he gets turned away at reception. Victoria nodded, already reading her next message, already past it. What Dominic did not say, what he had been carefully not saying for 11 days, was that the inquiry had come with a document attached. A detailed document. A document that outlined with specific data and supporting records a series of internal financial discrepancies that were growing in ways that would become impossible to ignore by the end of the fiscal quarter. He had read it twice, and then buried it in a subfolder of his secondary inbox, where he was confident it would not surface in any routine review. He was not certain who the man was. He was certain that letting Victoria meet him would complicate a number of things that Dominic had spent considerable effort simplifying. He walked back toward his office at a comfortable pace, sipping his coffee. Notice how quiet corruption is. Not the dramatic kind we see in films with raised voices and shredded documents, but the everyday kind, the kind that hides behind the word protocol. A folder moved into a quieter folder. An email marked unverified. A subordinate trusted to filter information for someone too busy to filter it themselves. This is how most institutions decay, not in a single act of betrayal, but in 1,000 small reroutings, each one defensible in isolation. The danger is rarely the man with the knife. The danger is almost always the man with the calendar, the inbox, and the gentle smile. In the HR waiting room on the second floor, Jalen sat in a chair that was too large for him and held his rabbit in his lap. Evelyn brought him a small cup of water and a granola bar from the kitchen. He thanked her politely. She sat at her desk and watched him out of the corner of her eye, pretending to work on a file. "You don't have to watch me," Jalen said without looking up. "I'm not going to do anything." Evelyn set down her pen. "I know that. My dad will be here in a few minutes." "Is your dad often late?" Jalen thought about this seriously, the way he thought about most things. "No," he said. "He's late sometimes when the trains are delayed, but he usually builds in extra time." "He sounds organized." "He's very organized," Jalen said. He looked at the window. "He fixes things. Not like handyman things, more like when something is broken in a way that's hard to see. He finds it." Evelyn looked at him. "What kind of things?" Jalen looked at his rabbit. "Companies," he said simply. Then after a moment, quieter almost to himself, "He fixes things since my mom got sick. He says somebody has to." Evelyn did not ask him to explain. The security feed on the ground floor monitor showed the front entrance at 9:14. A man came through the revolving door and crossed the lobby in a straight line. He did not look around. He did not slow to check the building directory. He walked as if he had already mapped the building and was now simply executing a route. He was 27 years old, a black man of medium height, his hair cut close and clean, a small silver wedding band still on his left hand, though he had been a widower for 2 years. He had the kind of stillness in his face that is not blankness, but concentration. The look of someone who had learned to keep their inner workings private because they had found that useful. He wore a plain dark jacket and carried a single messenger bag over one shoulder. He had dark circles under his eyes in the particular way of a person who has been managing on less sleep than necessary for a long time and has stopped noticing it. He reached the reception desk. Rachel looked up, and then something happened that she could not fully explain afterward. She stood. Not because he told her to, not because of anything he said, but because something in his posture triggered a reflex she associated with people who were important in ways that took time to understand. "Darius Bennett," he said. "I have a meeting." Let me check the..." she typed. Nothing came up. "I'm not seeing a registration." "I know, I need to see Victoria Sterling." "Miss Sterling isn't available for unscheduled." "I know that too," Darius said. There was no irritation in it. "Can you check whether my son is in the building 6 years old? He came ahead of me. His name is Jalen Bennett." Rachel checked. Her face changed slightly. "He's in the second floor HR suite." "Thank you." He turned toward the elevators. "Sir, I can't authorize you without..." "I understand," he said. "Please call up and tell them I'm on my way." And he stepped into the elevator. Patrick started toward the elevator bank and then stopped. He was not sure why he stopped. He would think about it later and not have a satisfying answer. The elevator opened on the second floor, and Darius stepped out. Evelyn heard the doors and looked up from her desk. She saw the man in the corridor through the interior window, and her hand paused above her keyboard. There was something, a flicker of recognition, that she could not immediately place. Not of his face, of something else. She opened a file on her screen. She was not sure why she opened that particular file. It was a corporate restructuring summary from the previous year, a document she had been part of compiling in the aftermath of the Sterling crisis, the one that had very nearly broken the company in the third quarter of last year. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked back at the man in the corridor. Jalen was already standing. He had heard the elevator too. The door opened and Darius Bennett walked in. He looked at Jalen with an expression that was completely still and completely full at the same time. The expression of a father whose worry has just resolved. Jalen crossed the room and pressed his face against his father's jacket. Darius put his hand on the back of his son's head, on the small, careful braids he had done by lamplight that morning, and held him there for a moment without speaking. Then he said quietly, "You okay?" "Yes," Jalen said into the jacket. "They laughed at me." "I know. But I wasn't wrong." "You were not wrong," Darius said. He looked up at Evelyn over Jalen's head. "I need to speak with Miss Sterling," he said. Evelyn looked at the file on her screen. She looked at Darius Bennett. The thing she had half recognized when she saw him through the window was sharpening into something more specific. The crisis the previous year had been a structural failure in the company's logistics data. A cascading error in the procurement modeling that had nearly caused Sterling Corporation to default on 3 major supplier contracts simultaneously. The board had quietly brought in an outside specialist at the recommendation of a financial contact whose name Evelyn had never been given. The specialist had worked remotely, submitted a series of intervention documents, rebuilt the procurement model, and identified a secondary data corruption issue that had been feeding into the primary error for 9 months. He had been paid through an anonymized contract processing firm and had never entered the building. No one on the internal team had met him. No one had seen his face. Evelyn looked at the open file. She looked at the name at the bottom of the intervention contract, a single line of text in a font size that had been reduced almost imperceptibly as if by accident. D. Bennett, independent consultant. She looked up at Darius. "One moment," she said, and reached for her phone. The boardroom on the 14th floor was built for intimidation, which was its function when Victoria's father had designed it and remained its function now. Long table, high-backed chairs, a view of the city that reminded everyone present how far they were from street level. Victoria sat at the head of it, her laptop open, her notes printed and stacked, her attention deployed across 3 simultaneous concerns with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been trained since childhood to treat focus as a resource to be managed rather than felt. She did not look up when the door opened. "We're about to start," she said. "Miss Sterling." Something in the voice made her look up. It was not loud. It was not aggressive. It had the particular quality of a voice that has learned not to need volume because it has other ways of being heard. Darius Bennett stood in the doorway. Gabriel Hartley, one of the board members seated along the right side of the table, looked up from his papers. He looked at Darius. His face went through a sequence of expressions: recognition, surprise, recalibration that lasted less than 3 seconds before settling into careful neutrality. He said nothing. Across the table, Jason Maddox, another board member, followed Hartley's gaze. His reaction was quieter, a slight stillness, the kind a person produces when they understand that something is happening that they had not anticipated and are deciding how to respond. Victoria noticed both of them. She was very good at noticing. She looked back at the man in the doorway. She did not recognize him. She had never seen him, but she was aware suddenly and without a clear reason that the people around her did. "This is a closed session," she said. "I know," Darius said. He stepped into the room. "I won't take much of your time." Dominic appeared behind him in the corridor, moving fast. His earlier composure fractured into something tighter. "Miss Sterling, I apologize. He came up through HR. I didn't—" "It's fine," Gabriel Hartley said. Everyone looked at Hartley. It was not common for board members to cut across executive protocol in that tone. Hartley was 61 years old and had been on the Sterling board for 19 years. He did not speak casually. "Let him speak," Hartley said. Victoria looked at Hartley. She looked at Darius. She sat back in her chair with the controlled stillness of a person recalculating. "You sent my son away," Darius said. He was not looking at the room. He was looking at Victoria. The room absorbed this. The absence of accusation in it was somehow more present than an accusation would have been. "I didn't know he was your son," Victoria said carefully. "I know," Darius said. "I'm not here about that. I'm here about this." He opened his bag and set a folder on the table. A single folder not thick but dense. The kind of document density that comes from precision rather than volume. The procurement modeling you've been running for the past 4 months has a secondary fault in the input validation layer. It's the same architecture as the error from last year, but smaller and in a different location. It won't trigger a visible alert. It will compound quietly for another 2 quarters, and then you'll start seeing contract irregularities that will look like vendor errors. They are not vendor errors. No one spoke. Darius reached into the bag again and set a second document on the table. This one was thinner. This is a record of 9 internal transactions over the past 18 months that don't align with the procurement data at the ledger level. The discrepancy is small enough to pass routine review. It is not small enough to be accidental. Victoria looked at the second document. Her face did not change expression, but her eyes moved across the page with the intensity of someone reading very fast and not liking what they see. Dominic, still standing in the doorway, had gone very still. "The system fault I can fix," Darius continued. "The transaction discrepancy is for your legal and compliance teams." He paused. "The person who would have told me I wasn't welcome here 2 weeks ago, he knew about the second document. I think you should ask him why he sat on it." The sentence landed in the room and stayed there. Every head turned toward the doorway where Dominic Pierce was standing. Dominic's composure had been one of his most reliable assets for 6 years. In this moment, it failed him. Not dramatically. Not in the way of a man caught mid-lie. In the quiet way of a man who has been hoping a specific silence would hold and has just heard it crack. I was processing the inquiry through proper channels," he said. "There's a protocol for unverified external consultants." "You read the attachment," Evelyn said from behind him. Everyone looked at her. She was standing in the corridor holding a printed document, having come up from the second floor with Jalen trailing quietly behind her. "The submission log shows the attachment was opened 11 days ago," Evelyn said. She was speaking carefully, the way people speak when they are certain of what they know and are choosing their words for the record. "It was opened from a device registered to your internal account. The inquiry was marked as unverified and suppressed from routing that same afternoon." Dominic said nothing. Gabriel Hartley looked at Dominic for a long moment. Then he looked at Victoria. Jason Maddox had already opened his own laptop. Victoria was still looking at the document Darius had placed on the table. She had read 4 pages of it. She had not been a finance executive before she became CEO. Her background was in operations in logistics, in the physical architecture of how businesses moved goods and decisions through the world, but she was not slow. She understood numbers when they were presented with the precision that these were presented with. She understood what they meant. She looked at Dominic. "Leave the room," she said. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Dominic left. And here is the part of the story that does not get celebrated enough. Not the dramatic entrance, not the documents on the table, but the 11 days before all of this. 11 days of a man going home each night to a small apartment, helping his son with homework, making dinner, braiding hair, paying bills, and continuing to send a correctly formatted inquiry to an institution that had decided he was not worth a reply. We talk often about courage as the moment of the speech, the moment of the confrontation. But most courage is much quieter than that. Most courage is the second attempt. And the third. And the willingness to walk through a revolving door with your child beside you, knowing that the building was not built for either of you and going in anyway because the work was correct and someone needed to hear it. The room was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it was. Victoria was sitting very still. She had made an error, multiple errors if she was being accurate about it, which she always was when there was no one watching. She had let a subordinate manage a communication channel she should have managed herself. She had dismissed a child in her lobby because his presence was inconvenient. She had operated for 11 days on filtered information and called it due process. She was 26 years old and had been running this company for 14 months, and she did not make the same mistake twice. That was the thing she knew about herself with absolute certainty. She stood. She looked at Darius Bennett across the length of the table. He was watching her without expectation, without malice, without the particular expression that people wore when they had won something and wanted acknowledgement of it. He looked like a man who had completed a task and was waiting to see if there was anything further required. Victoria Sterling, for the first time in 14 months in this chair, did not know what to say. She, who had restructured departments and eliminated positions and increased quarterly revenue by 11%, and had not once, in any of those 14 months, been at a loss for language, stood at the head of her boardroom, found herself without a prepared response for a situation she had not anticipated. And so she did what she had seen her father do exactly once when she was 12 years old, at a meeting she had been allowed to observe from a chair in the corner, when he had been wrong when someone had come into that same room and shown him something he should have seen first, and hadn't. She inclined her head. Not a bow in any theatrical sense, a lowering of the chin and acknowledgement of the specific weight of the moment, a concession delivered without theater, which is the only kind that means anything. Hartley did the same, a slight forward tilt in his chair. Maddox closed his laptop and nodded slowly. The three other board members who had been present during the previous year's crisis, who had been in this room when an anonymous consultant had sent the documents that saved the company, moved in a quiet, synchronized way that was not choreographed and did not need to be. Darius Bennett received this without expression. He picked up the folder from the table and set it back in his bag. "The system documentation is in there. Your IT team will know what to do with it." Victoria found her voice. It was steadier than she expected. "Why didn't you come through official channels?" "I did," Darius said. "Twice. The first time was 11 days ago. The second time was today through the front door with my son." Victoria absorbed this. "He told me to wait," she said, and she meant it not as an excuse but as an accounting. "I know," Darius said. "He's patient." And so the second act closes on a quieter truth than most people expect. It is not the loud who shape institutions in the long run. It is the patient. The ones who keep their composure when composure is not rewarded, who keep showing up when showing up is inconvenient, who teach their children by example that the world will not always be ready for what you have to say, but that does not change what you have to say. If you are raising someone, a child, a younger colleague, a sibling, a community, they are not learning from your speeches. They are learning from how you walk through a door that has been quietly closed to you and what you do with your face when you walk through it. He walked toward the door. As he passed the place where Evelyn was standing with Jalen, he stopped. Jalen was looking at the room, at the long table and the high chairs and the view of the city and all the adults who were still sitting very still. He had the expression of a child taking in something that confirmed a thing he had suspected. Darius crouched down to his level. "Ready to go." Jalen looked at the room one more time. Then he looked at his father. Did they look at the thing? They looked at the thing. And it was wrong. The thing I saw. "Not the same thing," Darius said. "But yes, something was wrong." Jalen nodded, satisfied. He tucked his rabbit more securely under his arm. Victoria stood at the head of the table and watched the man and his son move toward the elevator. She had a sensation that was not familiar to her. Not guilt exactly, not admiration exactly, but something that operated in the territory between them. A recognition of a quality in another person that she did not currently possess and had not previously understood she was missing. She moved before she fully decided to move. "Mr. Bennett?" Darius stopped. He turned. Victoria walked the length of the boardroom toward the door. She was aware of every person in the room watching her do this. She was also, for once, not calculating the optics of it. She stopped in front of Darius. She looked down at Jalen, who was looking up at her with the same steady, unafraid gaze he had offered her in the lobby 2 hours ago. Only this time there was no challenge in it, just attention. "I owe you an apology," she said to Jalen. Jalen considered this with the gravity he brought to most things. "Okay," he said. "I wasn't kind to you earlier." "You weren't mean either," Jalen said carefully. "You just didn't think it mattered." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "That might be worse," she said. Jalen thought about it. "Maybe," he said. "But you can fix it. That's what my dad says. Most things you can fix if you figure out where the problem actually is." Victoria looked at Darius. He offered nothing. No validation, no rescue. Just the same patient attention he had been offering since he walked into the building. "He's right," Victoria said. She extended her hand to Jalen. He shook it with a seriousness that made two people in the boardroom look at the floor to conceal their expressions. Then she looked at Darius. "I'd like your firm to have a formal contract for an ongoing systems review. Whatever terms are appropriate." "I'll send a proposal," Darius said. "Through official channels this time." "Through official channels," he agreed. He did not smile, but something in his face shifted a small relaxation of the precision he had been holding, as if in the presence of a correct answer, certain muscles were permitted to rest. Victoria watched them go to the elevator. The doors closed. She stood in the corridor for a moment after they were gone alone, which was not something she permitted herself often. The building hummed around her its usual operational frequencies. Someone's phone was ringing on the 14th floor. The board members inside were beginning to reassemble their thoughts. She had a great deal of work ahead of her. There was a structural problem in her procurement system that needed to be corrected. There was a deputy director who needed to be removed, and a proper investigation opened. There was a protocol failure in her own office to account for the filtered information, the assumption of gatekeeping as efficiency. And she had learned something she had not expected to learn this morning in the form of a 6-year-old with a stuffed rabbit and a particular kind of courage. She straightened her jacket. She walked back into the boardroom. She did not look small. In the boardroom above, the silence that had followed Darius's departure did not last long. There was too much to do, and Victoria Sterling was not a woman who permitted silence when action was available. She sat back in her chair and looked at the 2 documents Darius had left behind. Hartley and Maddox had both moved their chairs slightly closer to the table. A physical recalibration that meant they were ready to work. She appreciated this about them. "I want a full audit of the transaction discrepancy," she said. "Not internal. Outside counsel, separate engagement, no communication through any channel that Dominic Pierce has touched in the past 18 months. "Agreed," Hartley said. He was already writing. "The system fault. I want IT reading this documentation today. This afternoon, not scheduled today." She tapped the folder. "And I want to know how we missed the same structural architecture twice." "That's a process question," Maddox said. "Who reviewed the rebuild documentation from last year?" Victoria already knew the answer. She had not known it an hour ago, but she knew it now in the way that certain knowledge assembles itself once you stop filtering the inputs. "Dominic managed that handoff," she said. The room did not need to say anything further. The shape of it was clear enough. She stood and walked to the window. The city below her was running its usual indifferent business. The trucks moving the office towers standing in their grids, the pedestrians crossing at corners in the thin autumn light. Somewhere down there, a man and his 6-year-old son were walking home after delivering information that would change the course of her company's next 2 quarters, and neither of them had asked for anything except to be heard. She had almost not let that happen. She had not been cruel. She had been worse than cruel in the way that Jalen had identified with a precision that still sat in her chest like a small, specific weight. She had looked at a child in her lobby and decided he did not matter. She had accepted a subordinate's filtered summary of a situation and called it management. She had operated as though her authority was the same thing as her judgment, and had not noticed the gap between them. Victoria Sterling did not make the same mistake twice, but the more important lesson, the one she was only beginning to understand, was simpler. The mistake had not been about systems or protocols or information routing. The mistake had been about people. About a small boy with a stuffed rabbit who had looked at a display board and seen something no one else had thought to check. About a father who had tried twice through legitimate channels and kept showing up anyway, patient and unresentful, because the information he carried mattered more to him than the inconvenience. She had been so focused on running the architecture of the company that she had forgotten the architecture was made of people. It was the kind of thing her father had tried to tell her once in a conversation she had half listened to because she was 24 and certain she already understood the important things. She thought about that now. She thought about him sitting at this table, inclining his head when he was wrong, showing her even then without knowing he was showing her what it looked like to be accountable. She turned back to the room. "Let's get to work," she said. On the ground floor, the revolving door exhaled the two of them into the late morning air. The city was running its usual noise, traffic voices, the percussion of construction several blocks away. Darius put his bag more securely on his shoulder, and Jalen fell into step beside him, his small hand finding his father's the way it had every morning for the past 2 years, since the morning his father had become the only one to walk him anywhere. Their pace matched in the easy way of two people who have walked together long enough not to think about it. They walked half a block before Jalen spoke. "Dad?" "Yeah." The display board had a mistake on it, the one in the lobby. I saw it when I was waiting. "I know. Evelyn had someone fix it." "It was a sync error," Jalen said. "Probably the update ran before the database confirmed." "Probably." Jalen was quiet for another half block. "Then the lady, the CEO, she said I was right." "She did." "She didn't have to say that." "No," Darius said. "She didn't." Jalen shifted his rabbit to his other arm and thought about this. "Do you think she'll be different now?" Darius considered the question seriously because it was a serious question. "I think she's someone who doesn't make the same mistake twice," he said. "That's not nothing." "Is that enough?" "Sometimes it's the most important thing there is." They stopped at a crosswalk. The light was red. Jalen stood on the curb with the stuffed rabbit under his arm and looked up at his father with the expression he wore when he was not finished thinking. "She said that might be worse," he said. "About not thinking it mattered. When I said she wasn't mean, just, I heard. Most people don't say that kind of thing." "No," Darius said. "They don't." "Why did she—" The light changed. They stepped into the crosswalk. Darius was quiet for a moment, and Jalen did not push because he had learned early that his father's silences were working silences, not absence. "Because she understood something," Darius said finally. "Some people, when they understand something clearly enough, they say it out loud, even when it costs them. It's a rare thing." Jalen walked for a moment. "Are you going to work with her for the contract?" "That's the plan." "Okay." Jalen seemed to settle into this. "She'll probably be better at it now. The not making mistakes part." "She might be," Darius said. "You'll help her." "If she lets me." Jalen looked up at him one more time. "She will," he said with the flat certainty he reserved for things he had already decided were true. "She's the kind of person who figures out what to do once she knows what the problem is. She just needed someone to show her where to look." Darius looked down at his son. This small, serious person with the worn rabbit and the steady eyes and the patience that had been tested and not broken in a glass lobby that was built to make people feel small. He thought not for the first time of the woman who had given him this child, and then been taken from both of them too soon, and of the promise he had made at her bedside about who their son would grow up to be. He squeezed the small hand in his. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She did." They rounded the corner and the Sterling Corporation building disappeared behind them. The city went on around them, indifferent and enormous, and the two of them moved through it together at their matched and practiced pace, unhurried, taking up exactly the space they needed belonging to each other in the complete and uncomplicated way of people who have already found the most important thing they were looking for. There was nothing left to prove. There was only the morning and the city and the walk. And so we come to the end of it on a quiet sidewalk that no one will remember. The boardroom will move on. The company will be repaired. A deputy will be quietly removed, and a young CEO will become slowly the kind of leader her father had hoped she might one day become. But the heart of this story was never in the boardroom. It was in a man who had buried a wife and kept getting up every morning to braid his son's hair. It was in a child who had been laughed at by adults and chose, instead of resentment, to wait for them to catch up. It was in the small, unglamorous decision to be patient with people who have not yet earned it, because that is sometimes the only way they ever become someone who does. If there is a thing worth carrying away from a story like this, it is probably only this: be careful with the people you have decided do not matter. They are almost always the ones who will turn out to matter most. And if you have someone in your life who has shown up for you twice, 3 times more when no one was watching and no one was thanking them, go and tell them today that you saw it. The world is built quietly by quiet people. The least we can do is notice them while they are still here.